Hey everybody, it's Mike from the Mike Wagner Show, powered by Sonic Web Studios and brought to you by official sponsor of the Mike Wagner Show, international warring author Mia Molson's The Missing, available on Amazon and paperback ebook. We're here with a terrific lady who's a retired therapist, writer, climate reality leader, and citizens climate lobbyist, and known as the Shadow Expert. We'll talk about that. And she's also a former executive editor at Jeremy T. Tarcher Publishing, and practicing teaching and meditation for over 50 years, and a multi-award winning author. She's got a few books, A Moth to Flame, The Inner Work of Age. We'll talk about her latest, Meeting the Shadow on the Spiritual Path, The Dance of Darkness and Light in Our Search for Awakening. And what is a shadow? This new book will be explained. No matter the spiritual path we choose, we'll eventually encounter our own shadow. We'll find more about that. Live, ladies and gentlemen, at the Flesh Studios in beautiful downtown Los Angeles, retired therapist, writer, climate reality leader, and citizen climate lobbyist, known as the Shadow Expert, and the author of the book, Meeting the Shadow on the Spiritual Path, The Dance of Darkness and Light in Our Search for Awakening. Ladies and gentlemen, multi-talented Connie Zweig. Connie, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks for joining us today.
Mike, how can I live up to that?
With you being in business for 50 years, it's like, I've got a ways to go, to be honest with you. So, so we just want to hear about your expertise. You're a retired therapist, writer, climate reality leader, and citizens climate lobbyist, and known as the Shadow Expert. You're a former executive editor at Jeremy Tarcher Publishing. You're practicing teaching meditation for 50 plus years, multi-award winning author. You have some books, A Moth to Flame, The Inner Work of Age, and more. And we'll talk about your new book, Explain No Matter the Spiritual Path Choose, Eventually Encounter Our Own Shadow, the book, Meeting the Shadow on the Spiritual Path. And before getting to all that, Connie, tell us how you first got started.
Okay. So I began meditation at a very young age of 19. And that happened for many baby boomers, people in my generation, who were sort of in the counterculture and began seeking quite young. And there was a naivete, there was a longing and a wish that once we were spiritual practitioners, everything would be all sweetness and light. And for many of us, what happened was either we discovered some difficult parts of ourselves, or we ended up with a teacher or a community that was hypocritical, coercive, or even abusive. Mm-hmm. And today, there are hundreds and hundreds of teachers who are acting out their shadows, their dark sides, in the context of spirituality. But there isn't a lot being written about this. Mm-hmm. So my career has been about exploring what Carl Jung, famous psychiatrist, called the shadow. And that's the part of us that's hidden and unacceptable and beyond, underneath the boundaries of awareness. So we're not, it's like a blind spot in our awareness. And so my clinical practice was about helping people become aware of their shadows, how they were sabotaging themselves. And then my writing career has been about that. The first book was called Meeting the Shadow. And the second book was called Romancing the Shadow, which was more about relationships. Why do we keep choosing people who are inappropriate? Why do we keep having the same fights over and over again? This is all about the unconscious shadow that sabotages our conscious intentions. And then I wrote a book in 2021 about meeting the shadows of age. What happens after midlife as we begin to meet these parts of ourselves that are not appealing or attractive or acceptable to us? And how can we work with that? I called one of them the inner ageist, which is the way that we internalize ageism against ourselves and feel uncomfortable as we grow old. So I've spent all these decades now exploring the shadow, and I hadn't really done it in the context of spirituality. And so that's how this book emerged. If you recall, in the 1980s, we all lived through the Catholic Church childhood sexual abuse scandals.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, they're still going on today. There was stuff in the newspaper just this week about a whole new discovery about that.
Oh, wow. So in other words, a lot of things have come out, decades before, even like the 80s or so.
Yes.
Wow.
And this is non-denominational, right? In every tradition, in every lineage, there are people who act out in harmful ways. And so I had this question I was kind of carrying around with me. Why are we drawn to charismatic teachers? And what is it that we believe or that we feel we will gain from them?
Mm-hmm.
And how can we understand that desire, that motivation in ourselves? And then when it turns dark, why is it so difficult to leave? Why is it so hard to leave a community or a teacher when we recognize that it's no longer healthy? So I was kind of living with those questions for a few years. And because I'm trained in depth psychology, which is about the understanding of the unconscious, I thought I would use that framework to explore our spiritual search.
Okay. And plus, I was just thinking about a couple of things too, with you talking about the shadow being highlighted by Dr. Young and everything else. What was that one precise moment that got you interested in researching the shadow?
That's a great question. Nobody's ever asked me that. What happened was my early experience in meditation turned difficult. The community kind of became hypocritical. The teacher, it turned out, was telling us lies. He said he was celibate and he wasn't. And I began to feel more and more uncomfortable. And when I left that community, it was a painful process. There are people who write about leaving fundamentalist Christianity and what they go through to change their beliefs and to find a sense of belonging again. And that's what I had to go through in my 20s. I lost all my friends when I left the community. And so then I entered Jungian analysis. And this analyst introduced me to my own shadow in my dreams. And that's what has kind of launched this career and led me on this path.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and of course, it does take a rather interesting turn as well, too. And of course, being drawn to charismatic leaders and everything else. So we'll get more into about meeting the shadow on the spiritual path, along the other books, Moth of Flame, The Inner Work of Age with Connie Zweig. But first, listen to the Mike Wagner Show at the MikeWagnerShow.com, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at SonicWebStudios.com for all your needs. Looking at a professional website without breaking your budget, Sonic Web Studios is the answer. Sonic Web Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs that blow the competition away. Call today, 1-800-303-3960. It's 1-800-303-3960, or email to support@sonicwebstudios.com. Mention the Mike Wagner Show, get 20% off your first project. Sonic Web Studios, take your image to the next level. Also, time to give an official shout out to our official sponsor of the Mike Wagner Show, international warring author Mia Molson-Zia. If you love fast-paced mysteries, you'll love Missing by Mia Molson-Zia, available on Amazon in paperback and ebook. Missing is fast-paced and intriguing with an unforgettable twist. Takes place in 4 countries, 2 strangers, 1 target, where truth is illusion and those who love to be the first go missing. It's available on Amazon in paperback and ebook. Missing by Mia Molson-Zia has garnered great reviews and even endorsed by Harvard celebrities, including Joanna Cassidy, Forbes, Riley, and Manales. So grab your copy today for it goes Missing by Mia Molson-Zia, available on Amazon. Also, check out the Mike Wagner Show at the MikeWagnerShow.com, or over 40 podcast platforms, heard in 100 countries, including Facebook, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, also Apple Music, Odyssey, Podbean, and more as well. Make sure you subscribe to the Mike Wagner Show on YouTube, BitChute, and Rumble. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, and Facebook. Make sure you take us with you on any mobile device. And for great gift ideas, Go to Amazon.com. Check out the Mike Wagner Show podcast. T-shirts, pop sockets, throw pillows, tote bags, hoodies. Makes great gifts 24/7. Go to Amazon.com. Make sure you check out the Mike Wagner Show podcast. And for more great gift ideas like T-shirts, pop sockets, hoodies, phone cases, and more, and great books like Missing, Once, and Wrinkles, Amazon.com/me and Molson Zia. Check it out today and support the Mike Wagner Show on Anchor FM, PayPal, and the MikeWagnerShow.com. We're here, retired therapist, writer, climate reality leader, and citizens climate lobbyist, and author of the book Meeting the Shadow on the Spiritual Path, Connie Zweig, here on the Mike Wagner Show. And before we talk about your other books, The Moth, the Flame, and The Inner Work of Age, you've actually back to your past work before you've been a writer. You've been a therapist for quite some time, and also, how did you first get into therapy as well, or being a therapist? How you got started on it?
Well, let's see. I was working in book publishing, and the owner of the company decided to sell the company, and I decided to go back to graduate school and get my doctorate in psychology.
Mm-hmm.
So that was in my 40s. And so I studied Carl Jung and depth psychology to learn more about the shadow, the unconscious process. And that's what kind of led me down the road of writing all these books. So the new book is for people who feel some kind of a longing that they can't define. They're yearning. If they're religious, they could say they're yearning for God. If they're not religious, they might just say they're restless for more meaning, more gratitude, more contribution. And then what begins to happen for some people is they find a clergy person or a teacher, and they project onto that person. Projection is an unconscious process by which we attribute to somebody else something that we don't see in ourselves. So if we project our spirituality, we're attributing our own light or our own essence or our own divinity onto the other person. So we might say, that person is so enlightened, I want to be like her. Or that person can do the sacraments and he's closer to God and I want to be like him. And as we give that power over to that other person, we lose something in ourselves. We lose a direct connection to our own essence. And if we get more deeply involved in a church community or a spiritual community of some kind, could be Buddhist or Vedanta or Sufi or Zen, it doesn't matter, or Jewish. As we get more involved and we take on the beliefs and we take on the behaviors, what happens is we begin to lose little parts of ourselves. So what we might lose a connection to our own authentic intuition, which might tell us that there's danger here, but we don't recognize it because we're blinded by the devotion. Or we might lose a connection to our own authentic feelings because, you're in this community, you're supposed to be happy, not sad, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so
Right.
there are all these consequences to joining groups and taking on teachers. Now, they're not all like this. A lot of them allow for authenticity and freedom of choice. But the ones that don't lead us to lose these authentic parts of ourselves. And then if something difficult happens, and I tell the stories in the book of many, many teachers who acted out really harmfully, either verbally abusive, shaming, fear-based teachings, or sexual assault, or sexual coercion, financial coercion, teachers who start with tithing and then ended up taking the entire estates of their students because they become greedy. So what is that about? How is that possible? And that's what I wanted to examine here.
Hmm.
And it turns out that many teachers have narcissistic traits. They become self-centered. Imagine carrying a projection of hundreds of people or even thousands of people who tell you you're the greatest and you can do no wrong. So you should be sitting on a golden throne, or you should be immune to the consequences of your actions, right? Or you should have 3 Rolls Royces, like some teachers, right?
Oh my gosh.
Seriously,
I wouldn't know what to do with those Rolls
seriously,
Royces, to be honest with you.
that's
And
what's
Golden
happened.
Thrones, I got tired of it.
That's what's happened with people.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so then people are so identified with the teacher and the teaching that they can't leave. And in
Hmm.
some cases, they can't speak up because they know, like me, they'll lose their friends. They'll lose their identities. They'll feel like they've wasted so much time. They'll lose their meaning. So what do? How do they manage this? And so the second part of the book, I call it spiritual shadow work. It's about how to recover from losing yourself in a community, from religious betrayal, from betrayal of trust, from religious abuse, whatever we call it, and how to recover our inspiration. How do we recover our spiritual practices that may work for us, even though the teachings no longer work? And so there's a kind of an arc to the book for people who are just starting out, people who have become disillusioned, and people who want to re-engage with
Hmm.
spiritual practice. And
Okay.
it's also interesting to me that the Me Too movement
I was just gonna get to that.
it's had a lot of contemporary impact, never really extended to the spiritual arena.
Hmm.
And so this is kind of taking a lot of the lessons that we learned from that and moving that into this world. What if the churches and the spiritual communities could now change in the ways that some universities and businesses have changed because of Me Too?
Hmm. And do you think the Me Too movement, the practices that they applied, like in Hollywood, in business, in politics, and everything, do you think those exact same principles, those exact same actions are going to apply? Is that going to work in the church and spiritual movement, the Me Too?
Well, it's not about exact because these institutions are different. And the systemic problems, let's say in a Tibetan Buddhist community, are going to be different from a Hollywood corporation, right?
Hmm.
Or in a Jewish community, it's going to be different. But there are some principles that are similar. And one is that the question about consent. So what came out of Me Too fairly clearly was that if a man has a professional and financial power over a woman, can she really consent to having sex with him?
Hmm.
If he can destroy her career, can she really consent? Is she free to consent? It's the same thing in a spiritual community. If she believes that a teacher has spiritual power over her or religious power, some clergy tell people that if they don't consent, they'll go to hell,
Hmm.
right? Or an Eastern teacher might say, if you don't consent, you'll have bad karma for lifetimes,
Hmm.
right? So that principle of consent is a similar idea to what's gone on in the secular communities. And it's
Okay.
very tricky, it's very nuanced. Can a woman or a man really give consent in those situations?
Hmm. And of course you talked about earlier too, like with the no, this person can't do wrong, and everything else. Is he still held accountable by a board of directors or an executive in a church or an organization like, say, the Catholic Church, or within the church's elders, deacons, and the leadership, and also, like, say, within the ECLA or PRCA and those communities as well? Can they still be held to that standard, or has it just been put by the wayside?
So it's very individual in different communities. We've seen from the Catholic Church that it hasn't changed much. You know, it continues these payouts, massive payouts. I don't know if there have been any systemic changes inside the church. I really don't know. They haven't changed celibacy. They haven't changed allowing women to be ordained. They haven't changed the big things, right? But I don't know the inner workings. There are communities that have changed their systems. For example, Zen Center LA went through a big scandal with their Roshi, who was like 100 years old, and he was having sex with female students. And the whole thing blew. When it came out, it blew up. And the community, people, everybody left, people fell apart. And a female Roshi came in, and she reorganized the teacher-student relationship. She reorganized the communication style among the students. She sort of dropped a lot of hierarchy among men and women. She really took on systemic changes, and that community is thriving. And there are examples in the book of communities like that, and also of teachers who've tried to make amends, you know, who've recognized that their behavior was harmful and they've tried to make amends. And so it's very individual cases.
Okay. I was going to get to the part about women taking on the new hierarchy and everything else. Do you think that's going to still decrease the relations and trying to get things straight? It's like, the typical men. Do you think that's going to make more changes? You think be more strict and everything like that?
Again, we can't generalize. It's kind of individual. One of the issue of sexism in Western churches, in Jewish communities, as well as in Eastern communities, is epidemic. I mean, sexism in Asia, where a lot of these Eastern communities come from, they're sort of transplanted from Tibet and China and Japan over here. And so the teachers who grow up in the East are in monastic communities. They learn, that women are inferior and maybe dangerous and seductive. And then they come here, assuming they're going to be monks for a lifetime. And there's all this autonomy in the women and freedom and sensuality. And so there's this culture war in these communities around sexism. And that's not going to change overnight. That's not, those kind of cultural roots of teachings are not going to change quickly. So I think it's very individual. I think that, in the communities where women are gaining some authority and designing systems for their communities, things are beginning to change.
And of course, would they be able to help with the people or victims recovering from the spiritual abuse or betrayal? And of course, if so, and in your book as well, because it talks about how to recover from spiritual abuse or betrayal, what is the process of the recovery from spiritual abuse or betrayal, even by steps or whatsoever like that?
So the practice that I've taught all these years, I call shadow work. And shadow work is learning to work with this unconscious material that I was talking about earlier and make it conscious, have a conscious relationship with it. So the first thing is we need to uncover what it is we projected. What did we attribute to this person? Did we attribute perfection or knowledge, enlightenment or power or compassion. And to begin to work with that and cultivate those qualities in ourselves, take them back from the other person, and they may be true in the other, the projection may fit, we say in psychology. So some of those traits may be authentic in the other person. But if we've given them away, if we've given away our own spiritual power or purpose or essence, then we're going to remain dependent. We're going to remain in a childlike position. So the first thing is recognizing, what did we give away that belongs to us?
Mm-hmm.
And then reclaiming the body. The body has a knowledge and a wisdom. And often what happens in these communities is where the body, the inclinations of the body, of sensuality, of kinesthesia, are devalued, right? Spirit is good, flesh is evil. And that's pretty universal in celibate communities. So how do we reconnect to our bodily knowing and become safe and comfortable with it? Reclaiming authentic feelings. I know for me, I lost a full range of feeling in my 20s when I went into this community. I didn't connect with anger. I didn't connect with sadness or grief. I had a sense of that everything was going to be all right no matter what if I meditated, because that's what I was told.
Mm-hmm.
I was even told if I meditated, I would live a long life.
Or even $1 million, like most people would.
Yeah. So, how do we reclaim that range of feeling that makes us human? And that makes it possible to be authentic and to tell our truth.
Mm-hmm.
How do we recover our agency, our capacity to act in our own behalf? Because that gets lost when we become witnesses of abuse and we don't speak up. Or if we take on the identity of a victim, we can't act in our own behalf or on behalf of others who are being victimized. And so that sense of agency needs to be recovered. So those are a few examples of the work that enables us to kind of come back and center in ourselves and make different kinds of choices about spiritual teachings and spiritual practices that fit who we are now. This is not against religion or spirituality. This is not a black and white, everything is a cult and it's all bad. What I'm saying is, let's do it consciously. Let's learn about what happened in the unconscious, what we want to bring back to ourselves, where we might want to speak up about something harmful that's going on, and maybe shift to become a whistleblower. What does it take to become a whistleblower in a situation of religious abuse? It takes a lot of courage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And certainly does as well too. And getting back to projection, and of course that's been the main focus. Is like how does one avoid projecting, or how does one shielding from projection?
Well, projection is natural. It's automatic. You and I are projecting onto each other right now. So,
in a good way.
Yeah. If you go on a date, you instantly project onto someone. You have fantasies. You have ideas about who they are without knowing who they are at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can't stop projection. But what you can do is you can become more self-aware and what I call cultivate shadow awareness. Become more aware of the part of you that has a blind spot.
Mm-hmm.
What are you not looking at? What's in the corner there that you're not seeing? And this is important for people in relationships. You know, the cliche about red flags when you're dating.
Hmm.
So why do you miss the red flags with a spiritual teacher? So this is about learning how to catch a risky person, a narcissistic person, a potentially authoritarian person. How can you see that soon enough to keep yourself out of danger?
Hmm. And of course, the examples of blind spots and everything else, maybe just a few. So, you know, listeners, viewers can get some idea of potentially people may just, of course, got the obvious ones, but maybe a few subtle ones, which could spell danger.
That's right. And you can begin to catch those cues and save yourself from a lot of hurt, just like dating the wrong person. You can save yourself from hurt by detecting the cues before they happen.
Okay. And that's certainly careful as well too. And of course, lastly, what can readers get from the book as well?
Well, I would say that, people who are looking for guidance around spirituality or religion, people who are looking for healing from a bad clergy person or teacher or community, people who are looking for a new orientation to their spiritual lives. I would say elders who are looking to complete spiritual unfinished business late in their lives. For example, healing past wounds and reconciling with teachers, if they're hanging on to that wound from the past. So this book can give you guidance for all of that.
Okay. And where can we find your book at Meeting the Shadow on the Spiritual Path and all your other books at, Connie?
Well, they're all available online, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Books A Million. I'm sure they're in some bookstores, but I don't know where. So wherever you buy your books, you should be able to find them.
Okay. We will certainly do that. And what's coming up for author Connie Zweig of Meeting the Shadow on the Spiritual Path? We'll find out just 1 minute. You listen to The Mike Wagner Show at the MikeWagnerShow.com, powered by Sonic Web Studios, and brought to you by official sponsor of The Mike Wagner Show, international warring author Mia Molson's The Missing. We'll be back with author Connie Zweig of Meeting the Shadow on the Spiritual Path after this time. We're back with author Connie Zweig, a retired therapist, writer, climate reality leader, and citizen climate lobbyist, and the author of Meeting the Shadow and the Spiritual Path, The Dance of Darkness and Light in Our Search for Waking on the Mike Wagner Show. And we forgot to touch on about you being a climate reality leader and a citizen climate lobbyist. We forgot about that before we close out. Just tell us more about your involvement in that.
Well, it's not really relevant to this book, Mike. But I've been active in the climate crisis for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And, climate reality is the Al Gore training. So I did that several decades ago. And Citizens Climate Lobby trains people to lobby Congress around climate legislation. It's been pretty discouraging for a long time now, what's happening with the climate crisis. I would say today the most hopeful thing that's happening that I'm aware of, aside from President Biden's legislation, is a group called thirdact.org, which was organized by Bill McKibben, who founded 350.org.
Mm-hmm.
And the people at Third Act are organizing tens of thousands of us to move our money out of the banks that fund the fossil fuel industry. So the big banks, Chase, Citi, Wells Fargo, and Bank of America, are all heavily invested in fossil fuels, and they're funding the climate crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're engaged in helping people move their money to community banks, cut up their credit cards, and look for green credit cards, which you can find on greenamerica.org.
Hmm.
And, in that way, really have a personal impact by moving your money out of places that are fueling the crisis.
Hmm. And perhaps encountering their own shadows and trying to trying to beat their own shadows at it. So I'm sure they got shadows in that too. Maybe they can learn from you as well, trying to beat the shadows. So
Well, for a long time, I think the climate crisis was in our collective shadow. There was so much denial, but there's not a lot of denial anymore because it's so evident now.
mhm.
It's so imminent. It's so here with us. So I don't view this so much as a shadow issue, although there are some people who like politicians who refuse to look at it or focus on it because of their own vested interests in coal or oil and so on.
Hmm.
It's kind of heartbreaking at this point that people would put personal interest over the existence of the planet. It's kind of
Hmm.
shocking that, in a way we could call that a shadow issue, but
Hmm.
that's not, the psychology of that is a whole kind of different. That's not really what I wrote about.
Hmm. And that's rather interesting too. Of course, having all these things you're doing as well too to make an impact, Connie. And just a couple more things. What can we expect from you in 2023 and beyond, Connie?
Well, my book just came out yesterday, Meeting the Shadow on the Spiritual Path. So for me, this year is about doing webinars and interviews about this book. People can go to conniezweig.com and find the links for my events. I'm also going to be organizing study groups of people who are reading the book together. I call it spiritual shadow work groups. So if you're interested, if you check out the book and you would like to read it and discuss it with others, you can shoot me an email, conniezweig@gmail.com, and put spiritual shadow work group in the subject line and tell me your time zone. And I will connect you with other people in your time zone to read the book together.
Hmm.
So, yeah, the last book, The Inner Work of Age, had hundreds of groups doing this. It was really
Wow.
successful. And so I'm going to be doing that with this group. And I'm hoping some of your listeners will be interested in that and forming community with others who are wrestling with this topic.
That is interesting. I like that idea. Base it on time zone. That is a really good idea. I have to tell some of my people that. So,
Yeah, so they're free. These are free. They're online and they're in your region, so they're easy to organize.
okay, we'll certainly do that as well too, and we'll all get to work on it. And who do you consider biggest influence in your career?
My biggest influence?
Yes.
Um, Probably my writing mentor, Marilyn Ferguson, who wrote a book called The Aquarian Conspiracy, and she taught me to write. Yeah.
Okay. And what's the best advice you can give to anybody at this point?
um, well, my advice would be begin some form of self-reflection. So it might be therapy, it might be meditation, it might be some other practice that you find that you feel a fit with,
Hmm.
and begin to explore who you are more deeply.
Hmm.
Because we are all bottomless beings. We have many levels, we have many dimensions, and it's endlessly fascinating when you start looking within and really discovering yourself.
Hmm. That is a really good advice as well. We'll take that in consideration. Once again, I'm with author Connie Zweig, a retired therapist, writer, of the book, Meeting the Shadow on the Spiritual Path, The Dance of Darkness, Enlighten Our Search for Awakening on the Mike Wagner Show. Kind of very big thank you for your time. You've been absolutely fantastic. Learned a lot. Looking forward to having you again soon. Keep us up to date. Keep in touch. Love to have you back once again. What's your website? How do people contact you? Where can people purchase or check out your books?
So you can find my events on conniezweig.com. I have a 4-part course on shadow work coming up, if that interests you. My books are online at all the online bookstores. And if you're interested in reading the new book with others, you can shoot me an email, conniezweig@gmail.com, and tell me in the subject line that you want a group. Thanks, Mike.
We'll certainly do that as well. And Connie, once again, a very big thank you for your time. You've been absolutely amazing. Looking forward to having you again soon. Keep us up to date. Keep in touch. Love to have you back. Wish you all the best. And Connie, you definitely have a great future ahead.
Thank you.